have this first panel where we discuss career pathways for female filmmakers in sharing anecdotal stories. The panelists all have decades of experience in entertainment. We have one other panelist who's going to be joining us, but we're just going to get started. She's a little delayed. And so let's start with a personal introduction. Just please say your name and give us a little bit of your background, your role. And
Okay. Hello everyone, my name is Laura James. I'm a director and I started out as an actor, but in the business I started out as a PA and I worked my way up through PAing to office PA to production secretary to production coordinator, took some time off, and then got back into directing in sketch comedy, actually on the stage, which turned into opportunities to be a dialogue coach at Disney Channel, which is, if you don't know what that is, it's totally fine. It's an acting coach. And that, you sit right next to the director. It was kind of like a working internship that got me into directing. So it was kind of amazing. That was the plan all along, so I'm just glad that that ended up working out. It took a while, but I got there. That's me.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Francine Selkirk, and I started out, came from New York to LA to be an actress, and did that for probably always in a 35-year career. But along the way, I also had to make a living, so I wanted to be behind the scenes also. I knew that I needed to learn some things, so I was a PA, which I didn't even know what that meant. So I was a production assistant, a production coordinator. I ended up in commercials, which everybody poo-pooed at the time. I didn't really know that, but they did poo-poo it. And so coordinator, and then I produced for about 5 years in commercials. And then got married, had a child, and then I needed to not be away from home as much, I thought. Oh, I did produce for that period of time. But one of the directors that I worked with helped me cast. He said, would you cast for me? I know you're a big ham bone, and I want you to see if you can cast. And then honestly, from that moment on, for like 28 years, I didn't stop. So I cast commercials, I did TV, I worked with Wanda Sykes, I worked on for Bravo, a show called Significant Others, and I just retired, really, but not, because I'm writing film. So that's it. At this age, whatever this age is.
I'm Chelsea Stardust. I am a director and a writer, and mostly in the genre space, so horror, sci-fi, thriller. And I started out similarly to my fellow panelist as an executive assistant. After film school, I immediately started assisting producers and then directors, and then I started directing after that. So my path was observing and learning from many other people. So
Such a good way.
yeah, thank you. And I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Rosa Costanza. I had started out being interested in audio and music production, and I studied audio engineering. I worked as a production sound mixer and was in the union IATSE 695 in Hollywood for a decade, where I also took jobs as a video coordinator. So I did all the, for example, video playback of anything you see on screens within a set, handheld devices, tablets and such, office computer screens on set for one of the last Paranormal Activity films and Clint Eastwood's film Sully and some other bigger projects before I decided to transition myself to be a writer, director, producer, and now that's what I'm doing full time. So being able to move through different job positions or roles in front of the camera, behind the camera, definitely a big theme. And another big theme I find, especially being in a gender minority in film and television, no matter what your role, is that there's people who want to help you. There's mentorship. So my next question is about who really did step up and mentor you and give you proper good advice.
The person who was really, there's so many people, by the way, like there's not just one, but the one that really helped kind of propel things was the first movie that I came to work on in LA as the production coordinator was a film called Pulp Fiction, which was a spoof of Pulp Fiction, directed by a person called Bob Cohair, who I didn't know at the time, who was this amazing human being who was teaching improv classes. And so after that movie, and because I was on that movie, I started taking improv class, and then I became his assistant, and then he was directing on Drew Carey. And so through that connection, and over the many years of that relationship, both as his assistant and then just as a friend and all those kinds of things, my entree into Disney Channel was actually through a connection that he had. So it's funny that plus many other of my friends who were ahead of me, like people that I met along the way who had done more things than I had, were always so supportive and wonderful and helping like connect the dots of a thing. I think when you can be specific about what you're trying to do and or just be cool and flexible and flowing into a thing that an opportunity comes your way, like the mentors sort of like arrive, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's a really good note, is that if you say, I want to do this, I'm doing this now, but I really am interested in that. I had so many people help me along the way. The one person that I would say in commercials helped me, Rob Thomas is his name, not the famous musician. I worked in commercials with him as his casting person, and he started doing television work and films, and he said, I don't know if I can get you approved because you have no clout. But let's see if we can get you in there. And so because of the work that I had done as an actor in improvisational theater and in commercials, I had a really good resume. It was painful to get approved, but I got approved. And he was so supportive and took me on to other shows. And one other person actually, from producing to being a casting person, he caught me, David Wilde, I'll never forget this, he caught me sneaking into the actor saying, what he's really telling you to do is emote in this way, and it's an arc. And he saw me, I didn't know it, and he called me into his office and he said, I know what you've been doing. And I said, I thought this was it, I'm being fired. And he said, I see what you're doing, I know what you're doing. And in a way that was like, okay, this is it, my career's over, I'm done. And he said, because I'm such an intellectual, not me, he said, they don't understand me, I need to take a directing course. Meanwhile, he's already being a director. And I went, okay. And he said, well, maybe you should cast for me. And he gave me my first 10 jobs. And and they were men. It wasn't like a woman to woman, which kind of I thought would be the way it would happen. But he was so kind and pushed me out the door. Pushed me. I had directed theater and directed myself as a performer. But so I was very grateful to have two different people look out for me in my life.
Yeah. I'm a big Veronica Mars fan. So.
Yes.
There's two people that come to mind. My very first job after I graduated college was, I was the executive assistant to a woman named Allie Bell, and she was the VP of development at the Montecito Picture Company, which is Ivan Reitman's company, RIP, and was the only woman I've ever worked for in the rest of so the first person I worked for, and was also the last woman I ended up working for. But she was incredible, and I had never done anything. They don't teach you how to be an assistant in college, and especially film school. They don't even tell you that it exists. So she And normally you will start at like an agency or a production company, or excuse me, agency or a management company, or be on set. And work your way up to working for a production company. And I skipped all those steps, which rarely happens, and she just trusted me to answer her phone, roll her calls, schedule meetings, do everything that I had never done before. Thank God I'm super type A, and I was able to handle it. But she very much just taught me, pretty much filled in a bunch of gaps that I hadn't learned before, and told me the importance of learning who runs this studio or this agency, or know when a certain person calls to interrupt the meeting and get them on the phone with your boss. And she took me to my first film set, like real true film set, and had me, introduce me to everyone, and she was so wonderful and continued to mentor me. And then after I left and moved on to the next company, she continued to have me meet with her new assistants to help show them the ropes, which was very lovely.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And then later down the road, another mentor that comes to mind is a director named Adam Robitel. And I had worked at Blumhouse Productions for a long time, and he ended up hiring me to shadow him on his movie Insidious: The Last Key. So that was the fourth Insidious movie. And I shadowed him through that entire process, and it was right when that finished, and I was just by his side. I could ask him questions, and after that finished, I thought, okay, I am ready to go off and direct myself. And I actually just saw Adam last weekend, and I told him how important he is to me in my life, and but he sort of gave me that last little confidence I needed to be able to go out and direct a feature myself.
I love that. That's so cool.
It's so important when you're in a minority in regards to representation, in regards to not seeing people like yourself in the roles that you want to be in, or in the roles that you're already doing, right? So I mentioned that I had been a technician, and the first person that I apprenticed with, whose name is Bill Daly in New York City, felt it was really important, for whatever reason in the 90s, to try to uplift women in STEM and in the arts and as a technician. So at a certain point after apprenticing for him on a show called New York Undercover, and I was on a Universal Studios set in New York City, he said, yeah, you have to leave now. He's like, there's only two ways this is gonna go. The production company is gonna try to poach you to be a PA for them, or you're gonna keep doing sound work and stay in the sound department, in which case you already know enough, so just go do it. And I had a few moments like that where people who were mentoring me said, no, you should just go do this now. And sometimes it's just having that other voice, or someone who has more experience or seniority saying to you, no, you're ready. And so that's what I'm hearing that as a theme in your answers as well.
Yeah.
I love that. One thing that I think is really interesting and amazing and has accelerated, along with the consciousness of equity, being equitable, diversity, inclusivity, also in a network and studio level, that there are actually offices and officers for equity, diversity, and inclusivity, is that there are consciously more opportunities for female identified filmmakers. So I'm wondering, in all of our many years of being in the industry, how have you seen it change specifically in the last 5 to 7 years? Because it really hasn't been more than that. There's been this new wave of inclusivity. Has this change affected you at all? Or
I'm gonna start down here and change it up a little bit. I feel like I'm always the first one. I feel like we should go.
Okay, pressure's on.
Or not.
Yeah, it's interesting. It wasn't, so I grew up in a household that loved movies and loved watching movies. And I would watch, my parents would show me all different kinds of cinema, but I don't think it was until I moved to Los Angeles, and a little bit late, because the first person I worked for was a woman, and the first movie set I was on was directed by a woman, and it wasn't until a little bit later that I realized that it wasn't as present as I thought, because I also grew up watching Maya Deren and Mary Herron and Mary Lambert and Catherine Bigelow is a huge inspiration to me. And so I didn't, because I was watching films that were directed by women and then came out here and I was like, oh, I'm looking for a woman. I'm on, Vicki Jensen was the director of the first true set I was on. And it wasn't until a little bit later that I noticed how that was not the case from the companies I worked for after that. And then when, it's interesting when you're talking about the last couple of years, when I went to make my first movie, which was in 2018, I sought out people I knew personally to talk to. I was like, what is something you wish you would have known before you directed your first feature? What can you tell me so I can look out for those things? And of the, I think I talked to 6 or 7 people, only one of them was a woman, was a female director. So, and then since then, and it was just people I personally knew. There were other people that I just maybe didn't feel comfortable reaching out to at the time. But now, there are so many of us, and I think they were always there, but are finally getting the attention that they have worked so hard for and that they deserve, that now I have an incredible group of female filmmakers that I'm close with, that we are in the trenches together, and that's only just happened in the last couple of years, that we're finally coming together, because the industry very much wants to pit you against each other, and you just say fuck you to that, and that scares the shit out of them when you come together, and because they're oh shit, they're coming for, we're coming for you. So, but yeah, that's all.
Well, I'm going to pause in answering that question so we can invite Tamika Lamison, who's also a very accomplished filmmaker, and so if you don't mind, just introduce yourself.
Oh, sure, and thank you for, this was a great sort of intro.
Yeah.
I was like, fuck you to them. I was like, okay. Thank you so much for having me. My apologies. I was actually here on time, and then I was having a problem child here, so I had to go deal with her. Hopefully she'll be good for us. But I'm Tamika Lamison, and I've been in the industry for about 30 years. I run an inclusion program called the Commercial Directors Diversity Program, and it's basically a program targeted specifically for underrepresented communities who want to direct commercials. And I also work at a film company, and I'm a film maker myself, and I run a nonprofit, so that's who I am.
So I'm going to throw you into the frying pan a little bit here, because we just asked about how you've seen the industry change specifically as a female filmmaker and with the growing opportunities, because we've had growing consciousness about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's definitely changing. I mean, we definitely see people like Ava DuVernay, who is, creating specific opportunities for women filmmakers, and there's a lot of other people out there like that as well. We have incredible allies, but I did come in when you were talking about, yes, a lot of times there's sort of competition that is, there's good competition and then there's suspect competition, I would say, right? And so I think our community, our village is really understanding that we have to support each other. And so I've seen sort of that change happen with people who might typically think there's not enough. And now I think people are sort of embracing the fact that there's enough for all of us, women. I'm talking about specifically. There's enough for all of us. We can support each other, and so I've seen that change, that mental change in a lot of the people that I'm working with. So that's what I would say.
That's great.
Hearing what you just said, and I've worked in commercials most of my life as a producer and as an actress and as a casting director. And in the beginning, so I'm older than you, I know it's hard to tell, but I'm older. And in the beginning, I mean, my personality is sweet, kind, never give up, just keep going. And some adverse situations definitely happened, and I just said yes to everything. Of course, I said I don't know how to do that, but I will do it if that came up. But the woman situation, I definitely hardly ever had a woman director on set. And I knew people who did, and I was just waiting for that opportunity, and it came like 15 years in, which is insane. I mean, there were some print people who came over to film and television, and so it was starting to happen, maybe it was in the 80s, I think. But, and when I got to work with women directors and producers always existed since when I started. There are mostly women producers, I think, or lots of them. And then casting directors, there was no sexism I felt at all in commercials. I know in television there was. But I feel like some of it is my personality and some of it is you just wait your turn. And then when I had my own company, which has been 25 years, I really hired a lot of women around me. And though not everybody was a good person or the right fit, it wasn't just because they were women. And we had definitely men working with and for and collaboratively. But I have to say, I've struggled and pursued finding women who were strong, better than me. That's the ones I wanted working with and for me. I want them to be as smart or smarter. So there you go.
I have a couple things to say about this. On the positive side, I think in the last couple of years, like, women have had some more opportunities. And because of that, it has given us some confidence. It has given us some access to spaces we didn't have before, which I think is super exciting. And I think the banding together has been stronger than ever. Yeah. I'm so lucky to be a part of the Women's Steering Committee at the Directors Guild of America, and I'm like so proud of the work that we do and the things that we care about and the things that we fight for. I've been super blessed to be in the CBS Director Program, the DGA's Director Initiative, so been part of those programs. But the reality is, unfortunately, there's still less opportunity and there's still less space, which I think drives that weird competition, although I think we smarten up a little bit. So we don't buy into that bowl anymore, but there is still this, there's so many challenges in getting to open it up further. And then when Ava, for example, did what she did on Queen Sugar, which was amazing, there was so much pushback. And it's like, well, let's look at some of the lists of the other shows we're just doing all the time. So there's still so much work to do in that space, but we are incrementally just making those little places for ourselves, and the more we come together and the more we see opportunities, we can then make more things, and as they become more successful, it's just gonna snowball, and I'm super excited about it.
There used to be just the DGA program, and now there's a lot more.
Yeah, studio programs, the DGA made those.
There's many, and I will say to your point that one other change that I've noticed is that with these programs, they're being held accountable in a different kind of way. So they're actually supporting women. They're not just, oh, you're in the program, we taught you some stuff, you got to shadow. They're actually setting women up to win and to actually direct episodes, and surrounding them with support so that they are going to succeed versus just throwing them out there. Singers win.
And for some context, of the top 100 highest grossing Hollywood movies, 4% were directed by women in 2018, 16%, so a doubling by 2020. And I don't have the statistic for last year, but that 16% is a doubling from 2018 to 2020 within 2 years is because of these initiatives. 16% is still pretty low.
A lot low.
So,
a lot low.
And we're also looking at, there's the Best Directing Oscar has only in 76 years of there being the Oscars only won twice by women.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of playing field that we're in.
Yeah.
So in your various roles, because we have writers and directors and producers and casting agents, how have specifically roles for female characters grown? and in your different roles yourselves. I mean acting roles or representation on screen for female characters, and how has that affected you, or how have you been part of that?
Let me just start down here.
Oh,
Welcome.
okay. Thank you.
I'm always trying to pass up.
I noticed that.
Well, I feel like I got into this when I was an actor, and the roles were so thin and superficial that it's what made me want to produce and direct and write, to create more layered roles, because a lot of the roles that were out there, I was like, well, that's what they were just super stereotypical. Now I feel like we're in sort of an interesting, I call it a Harlem Renaissance of some sort, where there's all this beautiful different types of content creation and layered characters, and I'm just happy that I'm able to be a part of that as well. I early on started to shift my acting and writing and directing and producing, because I saw that there was a need for more interesting roles. So I still do that. I don't specifically write just roles for women though. I just write, whatever, floats my boat. I think my first short film was a male lead actually, but now a lot of the things that are organic to me are sort of closer to my gender. So, and maybe I think somewhere in my head too, probably when I was initially creating stuff, I was creating things that I thought might sell. That's so I was probably leaning in that other direction a little bit more. But oh hey Gary, hey, sorry. But so now I'm focusing more on things that are closer to me and my personal experience. So
I think anytime I'm reading, this is just sort of how it's worked out, reading a script that I'm interested in, there's always been a female character at the center. That's everything I've directed and all the stuff that I'm working on to come. So because those are the story, not to say that that's always how it has to be, but right now those are the stories I'm interested in telling. And that I'm also very interested in characters, no matter what the gender, being flawed and complicated and realistic in that sense. And then also being able to see a full arc for a character, and looking at, I'm working on something right now that has a lot of characters, and I really wanted to make sure it didn't end up being a body count movie. I was like, we should be invested and care about every single one of these characters, and that's something that the horror genre doesn't always do, that I wanted to try to change. So sort of paying attention to that, but right now, just thinking about the stories I specifically want to tell and the characters that those stories are centered around, and that's just something that I'm personally interested in, or looking at, how do I infuse this thing I'm passionate about right now? How do I infuse that into a character? Yeah. Thinking about representation, diversity, LGBTQ characters, doing it in a way that's organic and not performative, because sometimes if you don't state it, or state it within casting or whatnot, you'll end up with a cast of white people, which I don't necessarily want. So sometimes it's like paying attention to the diversity and making a point, saying, no, this is why I want it this way. But ultimately it comes down to great stories, and they're literally almost always about women. So.
I just want to say something to highlight, because Chelsea does work in the genre space. It's really incredible if you think of horror specifically as a genre, and maybe also sci-fi fantasy, that there have been more well-developed female characters, and not just because she's the final girl or whatever, as opposed to a lot of other pop culture film where women are accessories to the heroes.
Yeah.
It's just so interesting to see the arc of, where it started in terms of my career and what women could audition for, and a white woman could audition for in her 20s, The Friend, or, you know, whether film or television or commercials or whatever it was, not stage at all, it's a different deal. But it was what you looked like and what what you brought to the table. And for a very long time, a lot of actors couldn't get in the rooms. And some of it was because you weren't a stereotypical va-va-boom gal for a very long time. And that was insane. You were either a character actor or, or something sexy, I guess. And that's been a stereotype that I've been really working against, and yes, I've had to cast that in my life, but I find that a lot of the directors, even now that I have dealt with in casting, still want to go with the guy thing. They're writing the guy thing. Mm-hmm. They're not writing for women. Mm-hmm. And that's why what I'm seeing here right now, and inspirationally in the last, I'd say 10 years, maybe 5, is women want to write about what they know. And I really find that the men, I love men, but I don't know that they have the voice of women. And I feel that the women characters that I see on film are half-assed, underdeveloped, bitchy. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I don't see that in my life. I know it exists, but so I think it's happening in the undercurrent of just seeing this panel and where you're going with it, or we're all going with it, is very inspirational. And I know there's a long way to go.
Yeah.
A long way
Yeah.
to go. Better scripts. Mm-hmm. I had one other idea and I forgot it.
We can come back to it.
Yeah.
Okay. I love this conversation so much because I think what's interesting is when women started to get these bigger roles, it was really putting them into the hero's journey paradigm, right? That's what the storytelling was about, and so you just shove a woman in it and it doesn't work, it doesn't feel right. And what I love about what's happening now is we get more female filmmakers, more writers, more women, focusing on this women thing. There is a difference of the female hero's journey. It's a different journey. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what I really respond to in such an interesting way. And I have this beautiful opportunity to teach at the American Film Institute, where I get to work with emerging female filmmakers who are writers and storytellers, and the things that they're interested in talking about are the things that we're going to be watching, in the years to come. And the way that they're so inclusive, the way that they are thinking about film, and because they've come up in a whole different way than we did, it's so exciting what's possible. And now I'm just hoping that they can, there'll be the way for them forward so that they can bring those stories to us. Because I think those kinds of things are what are exciting for us, and we can build and grow and add more diversity, add more real characters with lots of, whether it's flaws or just an interesting take on life that we haven't seen before because we've been so locked into
Flaws
this.
are great.
Yeah, but the hero's journey is just so, we love it, we absolutely love that, but also there's a whole other avenue open to us, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah. I remembered something. So one of the things that all of you come to the table with in whatever part of the filmmaking industry goes is who we talked about, who influenced us. Well, actually, I had the great fortune of having Geraldine Ferraro as my 2nd and 4th grade teacher in Queens. Okay, so I didn't know anything from anything. You're a little kid. But one of the things I learned was that she was beautiful. She was bright, incredibly bright, compassionate, and told us, and I think she told the whole class, I feel like she only told me, but she told the whole class, you can do anything, and you can get out of Astoria, and you can go and do anything. And it was really interesting, and just recently hit me some image somewhere, some black and white image of her standing there in a pencil skirt and just saying, this is very good. I love what you're doing here. This little art project is good. I'm gonna put it up on the wall. And I thought she was the only person, but she was also about get out, go experience life, and also telling people to be a person. You're going to be a better filmmaker if you just, have so many facets in your life. Cook, have a child, don't have a child, doesn't matter. Just do something.
Well, you've really helped preface my next question, which is, it's kind of like the mentorship question, but different, which is who, occupying the role that you're in now, who do you look up to? Who, as a female director or a female filmmaker of some kind in some role? Is there somebody, like you mentioned Ava DuVernay, who's on my list, but who is it that is groundbreaking to you and female identified for the purpose of this panel?
That is a filmmaker or all things? Any all
Please.
things? I don't know, there are so many women that I get so inspired by. I think Hillary is one of my inspirations just because that chick has been working so hard for so long and has faced a lot of adversity and just sort of figures it out. Ava DuVernay is the toppest of the list because wow, she just saw the need and then started to make it happen with her influence and her desire. The woman is so incredible at being able to do the things that she's been able to do. No one's done what she's done before with
I
Ray
always tell her that
everything.
she must clone herself.
She must. Yeah, she must. She does so many things. It's incredible what she's been able to achieve. And I feel there's also Catherine Bigelow is someone that I just think is so amazing just because she was doing it way before, and Point Break was a zillion years ago.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then it was a long time before Hurt Locker. And it's, you know what I mean? So even Catherine Bigelow, it takes a long time for these things to happen. And then there's Gail Hurd, and there's just there's all these people that have been working for so long. Some of the names some that you don't, that have been paving the way for us this whole time. So I don't know, I could go on and on, but.
I think in television, Mary Lou Belli.
Oh my God, I love her.
I was on a panel with her 10 years ago, and I just was how she never stops, and
Ever.
she's always in demand, and there's a reason for that because she's 100%. She never gives a half-assed job. Never ever. And she's up and she's charming and she does her research. And I just read something because I worked with Barry Sonnenfeld a long time ago, and he has an article out and it says I came from a lot of improvisational theater along the way, and a lot of the people who hired me wanted me to cast improvisational theater, even though I love it. You leave the actor lost a lot of times. And Barry Sonnenfeld said, Barry Sonnenfeld of Addams Family and anything I can't remember.
Men in Black.
Yeah, Men in Black. So tons of films. He said, I never come to the set unprepared. He said, there's things that happen that can go wrong. He said, I storyboard every second of everything. I work the script. I rehearse the actors. And it's one of the things that all the people I know are saying, yeah, let him improv on set. We're going to get all this great stuff. And it's holy shit, they don't know what they're doing, the actors. I mean, only because they never got told where to begin, where to end, what's going to happen. Give them a little bit of information. So be prepared. And a lot of mentors. It keeps coming.
I mentioned a few earlier when I was talking about but echoing Catherine Bigelow and Mary Herron, and I also want to give some recognition to Deborah Hill, who is just an incredible producer, unfortunately no longer with us, but she produced Halloween and a slew of other genre films, but also Adventures in Babysitting, and she's just an incredible producer that I don't think gets enough credit, and especially in a franchise of films that are completely male dominated in many ways, like the Halloween franchise. And I also want to I think it's important to talk. We're talking about Galen Hurd too. I've been watching The Walking Dead since the beginning, and just the recent seasons. I was like, why has this show gotten so much better? Oh yeah, she's show running it now.
Yeah.
That's why she's in charge. That explains it.
Yeah.
But for me personally, I'm also very inspired by friends of mine that are filmmakers. So Natasha Kerr, who's in the audience here, is a huge inspiration to me. Axel Carolyn, Bria Grant, Maggie Levin, Molly Elfman, who just had her feature debut that came out this weekend. And I think it's really important to also talk about we fuel each other and support each other and see each other's movies and talk through crises and say who's great to work with and who's not to work with. And so they fuel my fire so much because we lift each other up when we're feeling down and celebrate together. And I think that's something really important to do as well when sort of speaking to these people. And hopefully in a panel 20 years from now, people are saying our names. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I definitely echo everything everyone said as well. And then I will add that Hanali Culpepper, who actually we were in the directing workshop for women together at AFI, and she directs so much television. She's directing film now as well, and we stayed in contact. And she was very supportive, and we always wanted to work together, and I could always go to her with a project. And then finally I came to her with a television project that I thought was right for her, and she said yes right away and signed on, and it helped us get that project sold to a studio. So Hanali Culpepper. She's the first woman to direct Star Trek, and also the first Black woman to direct Star Trek. And then I'm gonna throw Catherine Hardwicke in there because she's so supportive of women filmmakers in every way, and she's been really supportive of me personally. And she directed like one of my little short films for the nonprofit that I run called Make a Film Foundation. And then like you, I will add some of my personal friends, because having your village in a weird way, who you can go to, who you tell each other about opportunities, even though, you might be in competition with them, you're still telling them about opportunities and supporting them is really important to have. So I have a writer friend, Camille Tucker. She's a writer, producer, amazing. She's responsible for me getting the reps that I have. And another film writer, Autumn Joy Jemerson, she's responsible for me getting the managers that I have. And I met her, let me just give you one little example of how we support each other. She works on Swagger as a writer, and they weren't paying for her. It shoots in Virginia, which is my hometown. They were not paying for the writers to come out to see their episodes being shot, right? And so she's like, should I pay to have, and I was like, you should do whatever you need to do to go out there to be on set while your episode is being shot. And I said, but you could stay with my parents. And so she stayed with them for 3 weeks so that she could, and I had only met her once at that point, right? And then she sort of paid it forward by introducing me to her manager, and I got signed by her manager. So it's like, doing things like that, I just feel are just so important, and just, not being afraid to support each other in real ways that are transformational, and
Oh, 100%. That was such an inspirational story that you just told.
I know, I love it.
And I'm also really glad that you said Catherine Hardwicke, because she was also kind of first moving into a big action franchise, or fantasy action franchise, by doing Twilight. And then I
only got to do one.
Right, but I recently heard on this podcast the director's cut from the DGA, and I want to highlight this person. I also am looking for the podcast episode, Gina Prince Bythwell.
Oh my God!
Because if you listen to this, and again, director's cut DGA podcast on Spotify, you can hear how someone who's seasoned, who's got the cred, wanting to just step up into the next space, right? Because I think all of us are very intrepid, right? We're all risk takers. but you think, okay, I have a certain amount of success, okay, cool, but you still have to step up into this next space, and that feeling of I have to keep proving myself even though you have all the cred is very deep with women. And I speak for all of us because I know it to be true that we feel like we have to go above and beyond to be where we already are. So that was something really highlighted for me when she talks about the woman king, and of course she had, you know, knocked it out of the park basically. She absolutely could do it, but just that sense of her feeling like she had to keep proving herself hit me really hard. So, you know,
Can I ask you a question about her, just because I just want to jog my memory? Isn't she responsible for Lena Waithe as well? I think Lena Waithe was her assistant or something like that, and that she just really nurtured Lena Waithe, and then Lena Waithe always shouts out her and her husband Reggie, you know, for being supportive of her career and really just, you know, helping her to get to where she is right now, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I wonder if you have any anecdotal experiences from, you know, being on set or working on certain productions where you felt, you know, you'd hit your stride, or where, you know, moments of success, moments that help you kind of refute all of the difficulties that you've experienced. Can you share any inspirational moments? You don't have to start. Anybody can. Anybody
wants to
no
start?
pressure, Laura. No pressure.
Thanks.
So I cast my first television show for Bravo, and it was Significant Others, and it was couples in therapy. But all the agents in town were submitting like the most good-looking, great actors in their 30s, all different kinds of couples, all ethnicities. And, but nobody understood that it was a very specific technique that everybody had to have. And it wasn't just, oh, I took an improv class once, I'm really good. It was an entirely improv thing. And I ditched I had to talk to CAA, and I had to, and I had to talk to, because all the people, their reels were, you know, the normal TV cue thing. There was just regular stuff, nothing bad, but none of them had any real improv experience. And finally, I fought and I fought and I fought, and I got all the people from the Groundlings and Improv Olympics and all the people from all around town that didn't look like anybody that anybody had seen. And they went through all kinds of auditions, like 10 auditions. It was brutal. And who was it? Dax Shepard came in a lot on that, actually, and they turned him down. It was like insane. And Wilmer Valderrama. I mean, everybody who was fantastic, and it was just such a struggle. And at one point, not Zuckerberg, something like that, head of the studio, everything's laid out, and everybody went, this is their 10th time at the end, and he said, this is not attractive. This couple is just not, in a room full of 20 people, and this is our presentation, and balls. I just went, comedy's not pretty. Comedy ain't pretty. And the head of casting, Mark, anyway, he stood up for me and goes, I agree with her. These look, you know, he looks like Peter Sellers. These are funny people. The show's about funny. And I remember going to the set, being on the set. The set is the thing, and the writer who wrote something, and then going to the set and seeing the set and seeing the people and having had worked with people, I thought I'd lose my mind. It was so wonderful that, I mean, I also wanted to be directing at that point, but you can't. I directed in the room. I directed 30 years every day in the room, every day, and it was my delight. And now I want to do my thing. But I think that was it, to see I was right, and I fought for those people. I thought that was my dream job. Somebody talk.
Yeah, well, casting is frontline for a lot of diversity, and that you stood up for people that were against stereotype.
Yeah, fighting for the funny.
Fighting for the funny, and
That's really
another good line.
Yeah.
That's my life.
Mine's tiny. I have just it was a big moment for me, but I was on a my second movie my first movie was for Hulu, and then my second movie did a huge festival tour. And the whole reason I had made my second movie is I wanted a movie, it's called Satanic Panic, and I wanted to make a movie that kids could watch at a sleepover, women could watch at a sleepover, and it would inspire them to maybe make movies. And that's the whole reason I wanted to make something fun, wild, crazy. And so I did this big festival tour with the movie, and I remember going to a couple. I went to Idaho, I went to Chicago, I went to a bunch of places, and I remember being in Boise, Idaho, and signing posters and people, bringing copies of the movie and just wanting to meet me after screening the movie and doing Q&As. And I think I had 3 women come up to me and say, your movie made me want to make movies. And I want to start making movies after seeing this movie. And then someone's like, I changed my major in college and switched to film because I love your movie. And I was like, my work here is done. That's it. So and it was an incredibly difficult movie to make and horrific, to be honest. And so but I'm very proud of the movie, so hearing that, and I was like, okay, maybe I'm doing something good. Maybe if I can inspire the next generation of female filmmakers, then my work here is done.
I love that. I was gonna jump in, and I want to give you a shout out. That's actually how we met. I have a nonprofit called Make a Film Foundation, and that's how I met Rosa. She was our sound person on one of our films, and I use that as an example because it's really how I cut my teeth as a producer. And a lot of those organic relationships, it's how I met Catherine Hardwick and so many other people, but it's how I have been able to craft and create myself as a producer in this business was starting with Make a Film Foundation, because I was able to bring all these people together. I always say it was favorite nations. The production assistant and Johnny Depp were getting paid the same amount of money, so everybody was like doing it for altruistic reasons. So that's really what inspired me to continue to produce, and it helped me to learn how to produce. And yeah, I hope that answered your question, but thank you for that. And we've stayed in contact and supported each other since then. So
yeah, that was 13, 14 years ago.
Yeah.
So, and I'm gonna just pop in and say one thing. One of the ways I felt like I have to continue to prove myself, like I was saying before, that feeling of I'm in a gender minority and I need to show up. I need to show up for people. I need to show up for other people. So when I saw this opportunity to volunteer on a very worthwhile program, which was Tamika's program, Make a Film Foundation, where she had A-list people in Hollywood, from actors and directors on down, tutor, mentor, and shoot short films with terminally ill children through the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Some of those wishes were to make film. So when I heard about that, I was like, I have to show up for this. And I encourage everybody to do that. Show up for your community, because also for us as women, it's horrible that I keep feeling this way, but I do feel like I have to keep proving that I can do what I am already doing. But yeah, show up. Show people that you're a good person and that you're about it, and really that's what the arts is. I mean, yeah, film and TV is a big industry, but it's the arts, Laura?
I would say the hitting of the stride, right, is the
Yeah.
question. Like, when do you feel like you hit your stride? I just worked on this really cool project with, like, had 65 cast members. It was like this insane thing that I'm not even gonna explain. But all these young, 18 to play a little bit younger cast members, and a lot of them female, telling a lot of interesting stories, sort of like teen drama type of stuff, so lots of issues, after school especially kind of stuff. And the thing that was so amazing was not only were the cast members, a lot of them women, like, I felt so safe on this set. It was such a great experience. I've never felt this way on a set before. So that always makes me feel good, creating a kind, safe set environment that feels different to people is something that I am so proud of when I hear that back. And the other thing was that I, for the first time, was working with like a female showrunner. And, you know, when I would pitch things or when we would have to come up and collaborate with things, it was like, I trust you. And I was like, what? What's happening right now? You trust me? And my input? Like, what? And it was so awesome to be in that world. And I remember this moment where I turned around and I had a bunch of female crew there, like the costume designer and the makeup department, and I had some of our set people, and we were sitting there, and I was just like, this is awesome. There's like, and we had many amazing male crew members as well, but like there was just this moment of like, hey, we're doing the thing we love together, and it feels really supportive. There's no yelling, there's no like negativity around here, and it just felt like such a great environment. And I feel like that's when I feel like I'm like, you know, I'm doing what I love with people who are doing what they love, and we're all like making this the funnest way we can. And I think that that's when I'm like, yes, nailed it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because there's a certain amount of advocacy that you do being the person who is refuting the stereotype, the person who's standing up from the minority position, whether it's gender minority or sexual orientation or racial background or anything. Your actual presence is some kind of advocacy. But I wanted to share, I had a moment in 2017, October 2017, where I was able to stand up in a group of my peers when I was still in the union in the IATSE in Hollywood. And we had been informally gathered with the Hollywood Reporter to speak about harassment on set, and that female crew members had no voice and no representation in regards to harassment, specifically sexual harassment. And of course, this was the end of 2017, so the Me Too movement was on, and there were hundreds of women who were actors, actresses, above the line women who were speaking up, but crew member women felt a severe penalty would be placed on them for speaking up, and they were dependent for their jobs, especially union women. Being in a minority, and this is across all jobs, so it didn't matter, costume design, I mean, I happened to be doing production, sound, and video coordinating, but I had my moment where I looked at these, you know, dozens of my female peers who were as verified as I was, we're all union, and I said to the lady at the Hollywood Reporter, you can put my name in this article because nobody else would. And I knew when I said that, yeah, put my name in and you can quote me and I'm going to tell you some horrific stories. I knew when I said that she would publish it, and I should at that point just withdraw from the union, because I had 93% of my peer group were men, and they wouldn't really know how to interact with me because I was vocal and honest and outspoken. And the fact is I think of my peer group, I think of the women I know who've worked as crew people and don't feel they are able to use their voices or speak up for themselves. So the Hollywood Reporter article is Crew Member Women Suffer Harassment Without the Platform of Stardom. And I'll tell you, it's as true today, 5 years later, as when that little article came out. So my next question is, how do you, when you're in an above-the-line role, and if this applies to your job or not, how do you find and uplift crew member women? And do you do that, and is that something that is important for you in any way?
Yes.
Okay.
that same job that I was just on, I like to find out what people want to do. I take the time to talk with my crew, especially my female crew members, see what's going on. There was one, the set PA was being completely, unbeknownst to me at the time, harassed by a background, treating her horribly. And by the end of the day, she was like, clearly upset. And I was like, are you okay? And she was like, oh, this like background. And I just like, I'm really upset about it. I'm like, you can send that person home. Like that is you have the power to do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. She's like, but I felt bad because we didn't have enough background. I didn't want. I'm like, you never, ever listen to me and all of us here at the top will support you, and like, you don't have to put up with shit. Like we all did, so you don't have to, right? So, you know what I mean? Like, speak up and do something about it. You don't have to swallow, the things or be worried that in the way I hope that we were. I hope things are changing, and then sadly it kind of isn't, but like empowering them, I guess, is my goal, is making sure that everybody knows that it's a safe place to not have to put up with that and speak up. And we had another actor who had a problem with an actor who spoke up, and we fixed that immediately. And I feel like being in charge, like letting people know that it's safe to say something if you don't feel good about it, and we'll figure out how to fix it. So I think that's like a main goal.
Just that sigh is because there were so many things that happened along the way. Some of them pretty ugly, and some of them just under the surface and mean-spirited and unnerving, and thinking that you won't work again because of them. But there was one time, and that was me as a PA into being a producer. When I was a casting director, I cast a friend, great actress, in a commercial with a guy, and she was white, he was black, and they were both good actors, everything was great, and I find out, and this is a tricky situation, because, let me tell you what happened. I didn't know it, but every single time she went out to set, he put his hand on her ass. And this is not because he's black and she's white. This is because he's a guy, and he thought it was okay. It was not okay. And I didn't know it for like 6 months. She didn't tell me. And so I had the option. Do I call his agent? And 6 months later, she had the nerve. She kept it inside. And basically, I just decided never to call him again. And you can say, oh, that's a chicken shit way of dealing with it, or what am I going to do? I'm going to call him up on the phone or call him into my office, and yes, I could have, but I didn't. I mean, we have a million different situations that we've had with, I didn't move up numerous times because they said no. Numerous times along the way, as an actress, as a production person. And then there are times that you sleep with the director just because. No. Sorry, honey.
Save it for the Q&A.
Boyfriends. But no, it was a very, very, very upsetting. What do you do? So you start to, piece by piece, puzzle by puzzle, start to include and see it. Keep your eyes open. Who can you help? What needs what? Anyway, that's one.
Yeah, well, in certain situations, making a point to stating, like, these are people not to work with. These are people to work with. Like, trying to protect your fellow filmmakers, crew, friends, etc. And, like, I've spoken up about stuff, and back in the day, I was told, yeah, okay, whatever, too bad. Nothing was done about it. Now, more, not always, but you hope that there's many situations where everyone's like, they don't care. They don't care.
Who's going to believe you?
Well, and also they're like, yeah, but we really like their pitch, so we're going to hire them, even though even though you told us it's a atrocious story about a person.
Yep.
So, it's. But what you can try to do is speak out about those people, protect your fellow filmmakers, and also for me, anytime I'm watching something, I was like, oh, I really liked this sound design or the cinematography or this, so I'll make a little note about it, and then I'll look at what else their credits are, and then if I know most of the time nowadays, I know someone who worked on it, so then I'll ask them, how was your experience with this person? It's like vetting people, because I've not done that, having not done that once or twice, and then the results are not good. So you always want to be vetting the people you're working with if you can. And then, we're talking to friends, like, hey, who are line producers you like, costumes, this production design, whatever it may be, and really, talking, trying to say, hey, I love this person, and then you're employing more people that you care about or love working with or whatnot. Word of mouth is so important in that sense, and a lot of times the great people you're working with end up being women. So.
Well, I mean, I've always felt like sets are just more interesting and fun when there's inclusion, and I mean that's inclusion of everyone, and that's how we normalize it. So even when I do make a film found, I want to see everybody represented, like literally everyone. And when that's the case, it just seems like everyone gets along, they enjoy being with each other, working with each other. People who maybe had other thoughts about how someone would be, it's like something melts away because the village just becomes the village. We have something to do. We got work to do, y'all, and we all just get together and do it. And so, and then, I don't want to liken it to a wedding, but I'm going to. I told all my girlfriends, I'm like, you know what? If you want me to be a bridesmaid, I need you to have everybody at that party. You got to make sure that there's enough people to engage, that we all can get to know each other, and it's just more fun that way. I'm not saying it's a dating. It's not where I'm going at all. Okay, I'm just saying that I think it's just more fun when you're all getting to know each other, and people who don't typically work with each other or not typically in the same space actually get to communicate and value each other in that way. So, so I've always been that way, and I love it that we're seeing more of that now. That whenever there's somebody who's directing who's a woman or who's underrepresented, obviously their crews and their cast seem to just organically become inclusive of everyone. So I like that.
Can I just add one more thing here, back to what we're saying here, which is also when you get to the place where you get to have a say in who's getting hired, allowing the people who maybe don't have the resume and really looking at their potential, because for so many years we get hired on experience. Women typically get hired on experience versus potential, and really giving that opportunity to I see the potential in you and I see you're excited and I'm gonna give you a chance. Let's try this out. And I think that's a beautiful thing too, is just being really mindful in when you're looking for people, and widening your circle by asking your friends and keeping your friends in the loop, and having wonderful people like Connolly and Mary Lou and all these people. They are accessible people. They're working right now, they're in the business, they've been in it a long time, and they are there for you, and they're the most supportive women ever. And you can find them and they'll talk to you. You know what I mean? It's so cool.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I'm just curious about the space of failure. One of the things that I think is a challenge is allowing us to sort of make mistakes and still be able to do what we do. Sometimes you're not going to come out of the box. I mean, Spike Jonze was not Spike Jonze. I mean, he was Spike Jonze. He had the talent, but he had to grow. He was allowed to grow, and I use him. But anyone, right? Should be allowed to make mistakes to grow. That's how you learn, right? So what do you think about that? Anybody can take that. I'm just curious, how do you handle giving that grace and being given that grace? How do we make that a thing?
That's a non-gendered question too.
Yeah.
But for the purposes of this panel, I'd say I definitely feel like women have more pressure on their shoulders in regards to outward-facing failure. That if you stumble and fall, you feel like you'll be seen as a representative of your gender when you do so, and that's also less forgiving than if a guy, for example, were to make the same mistake. One thing I definitely noticed, having been a crew member near 20 years, was that I could see that men could bitch and complain on set and not be called bitches. Whereas if you're a woman, you can't be bitching and complaining on set because you're going to be labeled. But sometimes I'd see these guys have mini tantrums and I'd be like, get him juice and crackers. Is his blood sugar low? What's going on here? I can't act like that. I have to maintain a cool professional demeanor. I have to maintain my professionalism in the face of even, you know, situations that feel like failure. And I mean, for myself, I don't have an anecdotal story in regards to, you know, when I feel like I failed in particular. I feel like I was treading water as a technician, having reached the highest job class and saying, I can't go any further in regards to the structure I'm in. I won't be allowed on bigger sets because they're locked down by my male colleagues who see me as a threat. They're not willing to extend a hand to me because it's not that I'm a threat because, you know, of any other reason that I'm just cuter than they are. I don't know what it was, but realistically I didn't feel like I was going to get a hand up anywhere, and that, you know, the nature of our business is cooperation and collaboration and teamwork. So if somebody who's in a position to help turns to you and goes, I'm not going to help you because I think my boss will like you better than me. I don't need to hear it again. I felt like there was a failure of diplomacy, or there was a failure of networking, or there was a failure more to the point of being appropriately submissive in my role, which I could not do because I'm a leader and I was in leadership. So if they wanted me to show up and be less than for them, it wasn't going to happen. And I felt I had failed in my social politics. And I felt at that point that my job was no longer appropriate for me and that I had to step up myself. And I had a bigger vision for myself. But yeah, I carried that sense of like, okay, I worked almost 2 decades in this role that I have to tap out of. I can't do this anymore. And a lot of it had to do with social pressure and political pressure, and zero of it had to do with my skill sets.
Can I jump on that? I feel like everything you're saying resonates super hard. There are so many areas, I have so many things to say, but I'm gonna focus it on this. There is an impossible tightrope walk that women have to do in leadership roles, all the leadership roles. The possibility to fail is like almost impossible not to in somebody's eyes. You just hope it's not somebody who's the boss of you. And if it ends up being someone who's the boss of you, you get like kicked down to the bottom of the pile and you gotta claw your way back up again. There is not a lot of grace. There's not a lot of opportunities when you fail in someone's eyes, whereas the dudes I personally have watched have meltdowns on set, kick chairs, like totally be inappropriate, like they get another chance all the time. The amount of chances given to not women that I see is like huge, and the impossibility of doing it like all right all the time and not having like an attitude or not have, whatever it is they think,
Right.
and then getting like kicked off the island and then you gotta like fucking figure out how to do it again is so upsetting. And if you felt it, it's because it's happening. It's not because you did it wrong, and I have the opportunity to share that with my female students. Somebody's phone. I have that opportunity to share with my students when they say, my female students who are like, oh my God, set was so hard, or this thing happened, or I got unsolicited advice from my male counterparts, thanks so much. The things that happen constantly, and they're like, it's so hard. And I'm like, it is so hard, like our job's so hard. And also it's harder because there's this impossibility thing that we have to deal with. And so just like, the only thing I have to say is just keep on keeping on and do your best your way, and take in some of the feedback, and then also reject the shit that doesn't matter and keep being you, right? Because you as a leader, like we have to be leaders as women to show like what that is, and we're not gonna be perfect on every minute of every day, but that doesn't mean we're not awesome as leaders. So anyway, I could go on and on all day long.
I say one thing I just wanted to take my hat off to you for doing what was best for your mental, emotional health. Because a lot of times women do that and people don't really understand what it costs them to do that.
So much.
And you know, resonate with that as well. I take my hat off to you, and I unfortunately, I empathize and I sympathize with that. And yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Right?
I've had people, male crew members, as I was a lesser in the crew, like a production coordinator or something. I've actually stood next to someone, asked a question, and either they walk away or, you know, not want to help me. There have been so many people who have helped me. I actually was a PA, and I was one of my first jobs, and I was asked to check the equipment in. Check the equipment in on the list. And I didn't know what something was. And I said it had arrived. And it hadn't arrived to the set. It was a Weaver Stedman head. You never forget those things. For the camera. And we're on the set. Then, the next day, and the camera person says, I don't see the Weaver Stedman head. And, you know, and the horror of like what the ramifications of what you did or didn't do, instead of saying, I don't know what this thing is, I can't find it. You know, so that was a huge lesson in, you know, and they didn't fire me. They scrambled and got something, and got one somewhere nearby for the shoot. It was like heart attack time. But yeah, I've had people say, not just kind of look around, turn around as you're talking and not want to help you. Bizarre. Anyway.
It's a wonderful story. That's so relatable.
Would you?
Oh, I've been called. There was one time where I was called bossy. First off, I was. Someone came up to me and they said, "Oh, are you hair and makeup?" I was like, "Actually, I'm the director." And they were like, "Oh, sorry." And then I had someone say that I was being bossy, and I was like, "I'm not bossy. I'm the boss." And don't forget it. And then they were like, "Got it," and. Yeah, but the men feeling upward is, I've always found fascinating. I'm the boss.
Yes. Yeah.
That's my end.
Love it. Love it.
Well, we have about 10 minutes left before the next panel, which I hope everybody stays for. Let's throw it to the audience. Do you guys have any questions? Yes.
So I work primarily, first of all, thank you for all of the work you all are doing. I work primarily in documentary films, where actually 42% of directors, producers are women. But many have not come up through the system like you guys have. And so what advice would you have for a woman who's jumping into documentary filmmaking, particularly social impact films, which I'm particularly working with? What advice would you have for them in terms of achieving success?
I mean, it's not different if the medium is narrative versus documentary versus commercial versus, and even, you know, 42% is awesome, but it's still a minority. Right. So I just, the best advice I could have is for any filmmaker, but specifically to answer your question, start thinking of your marketing and branding. If you're a documentary filmmaker, a female filmmaker doing, you know, socially relevant, think about how you're going to integrate that branding along with the project you're doing with yourself as a filmmaker. Because coming back to the word advocacy, as female filmmakers, we actually have what I would call an enhanced need to advocate, to the point that I've been thinking where I am in my career, I should hire a PR person specifically for this. So that's my feeling about your question.
I would add to that, I started in documentaries actually a long way back, and the reason that there's more women in that place is because it's less budget, the budgets are smaller, exactly. You can do it yourself, you can get your friends, you can do it over a 3-year period, you know what I mean, and you can keep your day job, all those kinds of things are, like, matter. And what I would say is scalability, and it's based on what you're saying, which is like thinking about, like, if you're going to do a social justice issue, like, how does that get bigger? How do you make it more inclusive? How do you make this small thing with the potential of scalability to the bigger thing? And that's the only way that you'll be able to, like, have people look at you as a documentarian, a documentary filmmaker, like, people don't really see you as a narrative at that point, and so how do you show and prove that you are a narrative filmmaker if that's the way you want to go, or how do you make a bigger thing out of your social justice thing? How do you make it a movement, maybe?
Yes, please.
Well, I also just want to thank you all for being here, especially Tamitha. Because when I came in, I was like, oh, they're all white women. So it was like, oh, okay. So it was when you came in, it was like, okay, good. You know, we have another perspective here. And one of the things that I just wanted to talk to you about was what you talked about, and you said, wasn't it? You said you have a resume of experience or potential. That's something that you mentioned. And I think that we as a society need to do that, like, just in everything.
Yeah.
Because, like, you know, we're right now getting rid of affirmative action. All these things are happening in our society. Right now in Ojai, we're getting rid of affordable housing and we're developing. So it's all connected. I know maybe I'm trying to pull in strings, but it is all connected. When we have our elections coming up, are we going to vote for the white male who's been there for 30 years? Or the African-American woman or the Latina woman who doesn't have a resume of being in politics, but has potential? And you know, so that's what I'm really encouraging us all to do, is to just, you know, in all aspects of our life, not just film, right? But film, like when you said you won't go to a wedding, it's like, am I going to be the only black person there? Really? You know? So how do we do this in our societies? And I'm like, just Ojai, we need to just have like affirmative action housing. Like, you know, having black people in our midst is important for us to be communicating and living with each other. But when your housing is so expensive, then you can't, right? So I don't know, just all these things I feel are like related to everything, not just film.
But hopefully we see those same issues being reflected on screen.
Yes.
Because artists, as filmmakers or artists, have a pulse on,
Yes.
or finger on the pulse of social need,
Yep.
hopefully. Yes, sir?
I came from a conflict zone in 80s. I came in fresh to make social impact stories. Hollywood would not let me on the screens. So my company is one of the first to do use the browser. And when we became pioneers of live streaming, some of my employees work to run enterprises for Hulu, Disney, they learn. So today, across the street here, there's a man called Balkin. He was Franklin Balkin. They were the company that PR and marketing for over 1,500 Hollywood movies. So we are relaunching right here. We have funds available coming from the Middle East. And we're looking to engage storytellers with an exposure to a global audience.
Yes.
So if you go to Music Drive, I created something where I use a 360 camera on a cell phone, showing sampling of stories from diverse communities around the world.
Wow.
So in about 6 months, we'll have our metaverse component ready, then we're ready to launch. The idea is eyeballs will direct outcome of talent seeking to express impactful stories. So that'll be happening here in about, well, we're already formulating, but I don't think we're ready to launch till we get our metaverse compiled
Well,
properly.
thank you for sharing that. What's the name of the company?
I have about 7 different, but if you go to Music Tribes,
Music Tribes.
we launched that in Davos because people are complaining about the environment. I said, look, the indigenous are custodians of 80% of biodiversity. They are the lungs of your world. All you know. So if you go to Music Tribes, that was launched at Davos.
Wonderful.
So the idea is that we are going to use that same format, the power of music, to knock on your door as a minstrel.
Yes.
So we also have a footprint in China. No other US company can live stream to China.
It's amazing the power of technology to
Yeah.
create understanding between different cultures.
Imagine being in a virtual environment like right now,
Yeah.
and you're present from Africa, right in the middle.
Amazing.
So
We have some other questions I want to get to. Yeah, yes.
I was in the CSU for many years as a professor. When people are in film school, they've kind of made their decision, right? so many younger people are shooting film on their phones. And this kind of discussion, I think, would be so beneficial at both the high school and the BA level. And there are lots of, especially the CSU, you've got multicultural centers who are looking for content for their students. Something like this would be, I think, brilliant. Of course, I'm a white male, so it must be true.
Well, let's talk more about that, Jay. I appreciate that.
I think this kind of discussion would be so powerful
Thank you.
for younger filmmakers of all colors, of everything, that maybe they thought, I want to be a filmmaker, but I'm, insert adjective here. And they see you guys who are accomplished filmmakers, and with the backgrounds you have, they could really be inspiring to an 18 or 19 and 20-year-old who would never have gone to film school.
Or a 50-year-old.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jay.
Absolutely.
I know we had another question. Yes.
What are some of the programs or opportunities for women coming up that you're most excited about?
You mean like diversity initiatives or
Diversity initiatives or specific
contests?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So what are we aware of that can help bring more opportunities for women in different roles? I know in particular you have to look at if you're a screenwriter, director, producer, is it episodic, is it narrative? There are a lot of programs that are split out like that. But specifically diversity initiatives that are non-gendered versus diversity initiatives that are specifically for women. I can't speak to that off the top of my
Well,
head.
I'll jump in just for the one that I can directly speak to first. I just wanted to say thank you all for your conversations
thank
about
you.
social impact and all of that. That's very dear to my heart. And I do work at a production company where we do films that are about, social impact and commercial as well. So that's Filmco. So, but I run the Commercial Directors Diversity Program. That is for women and other underrepresented directors who would like to direct commercials. So that's anyone. I mean, you could be a vet. It doesn't really. It's very, very inclusive. And there's no ageism either. Like we've had, it's so funny, I'm in my 50s and I go, yeah, we have people in our 50s. I'm like, wow. I'm saying that, like that's old. Because people go, do you take people who are older than 30? I'm like, yeah, we have people in our 50s. I'm like, I'm in my 50s. But yeah, so that's one. And I know Women in Film, if you go to that website, they have a lot of different ones that are specific to women, right? And I think the Blacklist has a few things. They might be joining with Women in Film for some of theirs as well.
For
I
sure.
mean, there's AFI Directing Workshop for Women, which we love. That's an amazing program.
The NBC Female Forward program, if you're into TV things, that's amazing. The thing is, I think, to what you said, it's like whatever you're into, your thing, if you want to be a director, if you want to be a writer, you want to be a producer, you want to get involved in the communities that there are little small pockets of communities, and then you'll find out about the programs that support those communities more. Because there are so many, and there are good ones, and then there's like less good ones, and then you talk to your friends and you figure out like the deal. There are a lot of, they're more and more every year, and the more that give you an opportunity to do the work are where you want to spend your time, as opposed to just bullshitting around and learning more stuff you already know.
For documentary films, there's also Game Changers.
Yeah.
It was started by Gerald Dreyfus. It funds women-produced directed films. So Kurt's working on the funding side, not on the...
Is that the Effie Brown CEO of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys will remember Effie Brown from Project Greenlight, calling Matt Damon out.
Yeah.
She's a friend of mine. She's a firecracker.
Well, this has been awesome. Do you have any final thoughts you want to share, panelists?
I just want to say thank you all so much for coming. I'm so honored to be a part of this panel, and I love that we're having these conversations. And I think with all of us caring about it and all of us talking about it, we are the ones who have the power to make things different as long as we keep our intentions clear around wanting to open this space up. I think it's a beautiful thing. So I just super appreciate you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just ask you for your name, because some of us came in late.
Yes.
Yes.
There's-
Oh, perfect.
there's
Okay.
Also
Emmy
that,
here.
yeah. I'm Laura James.
Okay.
Francine Selkirk.
Chelsea Stardust.
Tamika Lamison, and I do want to say I'm a proponent of paying it forward and paying it back. So if you can do that, I think that's how we all take care of each other in the community, and that is inclusive of everyone. Pay it forward, I can do it at Starbucks. I buy the person behind me, and I did it once, and then literally the next day, someone did it for me. I was like, oh my God, that came back quick. So yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody.